So I'm excited to show you one of the things that we learned last week at the Flourish conference, and that was how to stamp into paint. And this was the Barnwood stamp. And hopefully you can see the texture on there. So I wanted to show you how to do it. We used Annie Sloan paint and wax when we did this, but I'm going to do it with DIY paint and wax. And I already tried it, so it does work. Annie Sloan's wax is known to be able to be painted over the top once you wax it. And I thought, well, I've not tried that with DIY wax, but it does work. So let me show you what we did. I'm going to do two projects today. Actually, I think I'll paint on the back side of this board so that it's bigger than the sample board I was going to use. So let me move those out of the way. And I'm going to start with, this is Prairie Gray paint, and I haven't added anything to it. So I'm going to use salt wash on this batch, and then I want to show you how to use the paint frosting thickening agent to do the next one. So we're going to take a little bit of the salt wash, and we're just going to put it in there. And basically, we're just wanting to thicken this up a little bit. We want the paint to be a little bit thicker than normal. And the reason for that is to keep it, so when you paint it on, it stays kind of poofed up, for lack of better words. It still has the volume. If you just paint it, and you could do it with paint, but we do want a little extra volume in this. I need another scooper here. And you can just play with it, and you'll feel it as you're putting product in there of how it feels thickening it up as you're stirring it. And it's definitely thicker than when I started. I think I'm just going to put a smidge more in there. And this particular project here, this first one I'm going to do, would be great for, say you have a piece of furniture and the top of it's floor mica and it's just ugly, and you're like, the rest of this piece is fabulous, but the floor mica is ugly, and you don't want to just paint it. You want to give it some character. This would be really awesome. And depending on the coloring, so we were given colors to kind of make it look kind of either barnwood-ish or kind of beachy tones. But you can play with it and get different colors. So I think this is going to be thick enough. And I think before I start painting that on, I'm going to get the next one started. And the next one I'm going to use Queen Bee. And I'm just going to get something, because it's with DIY paint, if you open it and see it's you know what, I may not even have to put in the paint frosting, because this is thickened up. This has been opened already. But for the sake of this, I'm going to, so this, see how thick it is? I could probably just go ahead and paint with that. But for the point of this exercise, I'm going to put a little water in there. That might have been a little too much. That was. And just water it down. I probably should have just opened up a new one so you could see. I haven't used this color in a while, so it's kind of thickened up on me. But let's just put another little glop in there. So this will be for the next project board. It won't be for this one. But the reason why I am doing it this way is because this takes a few minutes to set up, to start activating the thickening agent. So it doesn't take much, and just a couple drops. That might have been a little bit more than a couple drops. And then just stir it in and set it aside. So I'll put this over here, close this up, and then we'll get our chip brush. I'm going to start painting this. And remember, you're wanting it thick. Ooh, I got a hair in there too. That can't be mine, right? Let's get that. Okay. So I'm just using a chip brush. And I think I want it just a smidge thicker. You'll be able to feel it when you start putting it on there. What did I do? There we go. It doesn't have to be, necessarily perfect when you put it on here. You want coverage, especially if you're working on a piece, but if you're doing your sample board, just to get a feel of it. And I would suggest doing a sample board just to kind of give you an overall feel of what this will be like. I'm going to turn this. We did have a lot of fun doing these breakout where it was hands-on. This was taught to us by Jonathan Mark Mendez out of England. Wonderful, wonderful person. If you don't follow him, look him up on YouTube or Instagram. He uses Annie Sloan. He's one of her, I don't want to say mentors. He works with Annie Sloan and her paint line. But he's just an absolute delight. Great sense of humor. We just had a lot of fun with him last week. All right, so I'm going to do, nope. Got a little chunky in there. So I'm going to do barnwood in this. And you want to kind of mix it up. And what I'm going to do on the sample board here is I'm going to make sure I've got lines in it. And so you can see the effect. One of the gals that was sitting a couple seats down from me did it this way, and it really just turned out beautiful. So you'll want to mix it up with your different textures here of barnwood. Thing from the, and this still isn't quite as thick as I wanted it. That one's turning out pretty good. So now I'm going to flip this and I'm going to go over. You don't want your seams matching up because you wouldn't see that where they would have the seam straight down. You always stagger it. So we're going to kind of pretend this is a bigger piece. This other piece is just making a wonderful impression because there's a lot going on with it. And then let's see, And then we'll go back. I'm just going to keep using these 2 pieces since I have it, but you can choose, you know, whichever pieces you like the best. This barnwood stamp is very versatile. I did in my shop, I did a display wall with it, and it turned out really very fun. Okay, then one more. And then we're gonna set this aside and let it dry. Okay, while this was setting up, I went ahead and took a baby wipe, since I'm out in my shed, to the stencils or the stamps that I just used, just to get some of the paint off of them. And then you want to, if you're close to a sink, just go ahead and go get them cleaned up. I should have probably grabbed another chip brush, but this will work. You want it added texture. Since I'm only going to stamp the center of this, a chip brush would give you some added texture. That being said, if you wanted it to be smooth around, then the foam brush is good too. And the paint frosting will last a little while. You can put it in a container with a lid and airtight, and you can use it then for a while. Okay, that looks pretty good. I went ahead and put the butterfly on a backing, just so it'll be a little easier to lift as long as it stays on that backing. No, we'll do it this way. Lift both sides, and there we go. That is very pretty. And you can see basically what it's doing is it's kind of pulling up the paint. So where the lines are, it's pulling it out. So it leaves then this nice texture. But I think that turned out really, really cool. Now with the paint frosting, when I first started playing with this, I realized that if you blow dry it and you get it kind of hot, it will do its own cracking. Okay, so I got the heat gun, and it might have dried in the meantime a little too much for this to work, but let's give it a try and see what happens. So I kicked it up to high heat, and that's when it started kind of giving a little bit more texture. So I think because it was already starting to dry when I got the heat gun on it, it didn't do it quite as much, but there is some lines through here, and there's a line here. So I'm going to go ahead and let this dry naturally for the rest of this, and we'll see what we come up with. But if you do want a little bit of an extra texture in there using the heat gun, and I have a pretty powerful or high heat, it's a 1500 watt dual heat gun. Okay, this is nice and dry, and I wanted to show you again closer up the cracking that happened when I put heat to that. It's kind of a nice little side effect, and you can see like up here I didn't use the heat, and this is nice and smooth. This has some brush marks in it, and I think I did hit this. There's even a little bit of kind of bubbling that happened, which is fun. So what we're going to do next is we're going to wax with clear wax. And when you put the wax on DIY paint, you can see it goes back to the color it was when it was wet. And it will dry out back to closer to this color. So, in other words, don't panic. All right, so I'm going to take a paper towel now, just because there's a lot of wax on that. And I'm just going to kind of wipe it back a little bit. And you can see it's already starting to dry. And it's coming, it's lightening up. So next, what we'll want to do is I want my secondary color. So I'm going to use Mermaid Tail DIY. Oh, and this is a thick guy. Also, until I've been using my paints and then I just don't necessarily put the lid on really tight, and then I don't use them. What usually happens is I probably grab another one from stock instead of actually looking to see if I've got any. So I'm just watering this down. A, because it's way too thick, but also because we're wanting a wash. We don't want to just paint over the whole thing. That's kind of defeating the purpose, right? So I'm just watering this down a little bit. And this is kind of my version of what we were taught, because I'm not using the same paint. We were using Annie Sloan, but I did want to show that you could do it with the DIY paint. All right, so now we're going to take a brush, and I'm also going to just spray down the board a little bit, just for a little extra moisture. And you can see it's beading up because of the wax. But that, let's see, I've got a little bit of this mixed up just for the barnwood. Let's just add that in there. And then just take your brush again and go over. So that makes a nice kind of wash there. Multicolor wash. That's very pretty. And you're just going to come along and wipe it back. On the butterfly, this is very pretty, having the multicolors. I think I'm going to spray it a little bit with water because it is drying quickly, even though the wax is on it. And the lines here are a little bit more subtle. That's okay. There's still one more step. So we're going to let this dry again. All right, this is dried, and then I re-waxed it with the clear wax, just like I did on the other board. And now I'm going to take some watered down colors, and this one is Farm Fresh. I'm just gonna put some of the colors on. And there doesn't have to be a rhyme or a reason. It doesn't have to be perfect. And I'm going to take some of, this is Faded Burlap, watered down again. And grab another brush. Put this down. And then kind of start mixing them together. So you're kind of just kind of blending them. You could put a third color down. I needed to wash out these chip brushes before I started using them. It's always a good idea to wash out your brushes before you use them. Don't use them new, especially with bristled brushes, because you want to get the bristles out, and they're less likely to come off when you're doing a project. Okay, I think I want a little bit more. Take a paper towel again, and we're going to start wiping it back. So the next step would be to wax it again. And then at that point in time, you can put on a dark wax also. So once again, you got to let this dry, and then we can put on the wax. And so I have my dark wax, but I want to point this out. See this kind of white spot in there? I know a lot of people open up their colored waxes and see that. You can't see it as much in the white, but it's okay. It is just a little bit of separation with the wax. Not a big deal. Just get in there and use it. Let's see, I got a dark wax brush, but you can just kind of, mix it in there. I'm going to wipe some of that off because I don't want it to be that dark. And go every which direction with this. So you kind of get it into the nooks and crannies of your butterfly. There's also black wax. I don't use personally the black wax as often. I would use it more on a piece of furniture. I just haven't found quite the time to use it as far as a crafting project. Not saying that it would be fine to use black on this. I like the dark brown. All right, now you're like, that's a hot mess, right? Okay, let's grab, I keep going through the paper towels today. And just rub it out. Looking pretty good. Let's go ahead and put some, it's still a little damp, but I think I'm gonna go ahead and move forward with this. So what made this interesting is the next step, which one of the gals sitting two down from me did. And I just thought it was quite clever of her. But she took the dark wax, and you could also do this with the dark paint, your base paint. She just kind of went along the line of the seam of the stamp. And that's what really helped. And I wish I remembered her name. I'm not even sure. There was 60 some people at this retreat or this conference, and it was hard to meet everybody. On the last day, I looked over on the table next to me at the last session, and I thought, I don't think I've met that person. And I thought, have they been here this entire time? It was just hard to, get to know everybody. So once again, I think, letting the wax dry a little bit helps. If you're using Annie Sloan paint, you don't have to let the wax dry. You can just go ahead and, or at least we did. We just went ahead and it seemed to work. And also I think that I probably could have used a little bit more salt wash when I did it. Because this, you can really see the texture in my first board, my sample board. But isn't that pretty? If you have any questions about any of the products we use in this video, you can go to our website at www.boutiquepaint.com.